Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Thursday, June the 29th. And welcome to our commentary. Today, we're going to touch base once again with our friend George Rodriguez from South Texas. We're going to kick around a few things about Texas, but we're also going to talk about this Supreme Court decision today that has a lot of people melting down, a little hysterical reaction to the Supreme Court. But we'll get into that. So let me say hello to our friend George. How are you, George?
Real good. Kind of hot down here, but very good.
Well, I don't think you get any cooler if you came north. So I have a feeling that the entire state of Texas right now is under a heat wave. By the way, on this topic of the heat wave, I saw a note this morning that this heat wave, this particular one, has been a boom for solar energy, that a lot of people in Texas are relying on solar energy for residential use. I don't know much about it. I don't know if you have heard anything about that, George.
Well, I know here in San Antonio, the energy company has been promoting uh, a special discount if you put up some solar panels, and the discount goes on for years. It's my understanding, but there's been a lot of folks that have taken advantage of it, and in this heat, in this sunshine, I mean, obviously they are gathering a lot more, and they are able to sell back
Right.
some of that energy that they capture. They sell it back to the company.
Well, I know a friend of ours has solar energy at their home, and they seem to be pretty happy with it. I mean, in this heat, it may be something with the kind of sun. It might be something worthwhile. Well, the big opinion today, and it was expected. I love the way, by the way, the Supreme Court does these things. I mean, they must have somebody in the Supreme Court who plans when these opinions are put out there, because they tease you so well. I mean, it's like they say these decisions are going to come out, and they come out one a day at 10 o'clock, and it's just remarkable how they do it. And I'm kind of glad that they do it this way, because they give us time to talk about it,
Correct.
instead of releasing all of them at once. But my understanding is that they've all been written. It's just that how they come out,
How they release it.
how they release it. Yeah, but they've all been written already. I mean, if you remember the Dobbs decision roughly a year ago,
They had
that
drafts on that already ready.
yeah, they had that ready in April or something, and then they waited until some. Anyway, they released it, and of course, for you and I of our generation, you know, affirmative action is something we kind of grew up with. I remember when it was a an issue that people were talking about in the 70s and 80s, and I remember listening to people say, "Well, affirmative action is going to be a way of balancing the playing field." With the idea that some people didn't have the same opportunities, which is true, they didn't. And they were going to be using affirmative action to sort of level the playing field. That's what I remember of those conversations, late 70s, 80s, George. That's what I remember. What do you remember?
Well, I was very, very lucky, and in many ways, I didn't recognize, because I was so young. I did not recognize the historic value of the meetings that I was attending. But when I was a an intern, I was allowed. This was 1975. An intern in Washington D.C. I was allowed to attend uh, some meetings, some initial meetings to discuss the groundwork for affirmative action, which was established as an executive order at that point by the Nixon and then Ford administrations.
Oh, okay. Well, pardon me for interrupting. That's a very interesting point. I'm glad you mentioned that, and forgive me for interrupting you, but that's an important point that I didn't know. That affirmative action was a Nixon executive order. It was never actually passed by the Congress. Am
No,
I right?
no. At a later time in 19, I believe it was 1985. Um, there was an enactment, an amendment to the Civil Rights Act that included affirmative action. as a uh, they didn't call it as a law. They called it as a, gosh, I can't remember the term, but again, that was in there, and it was encouraged. It was moved into the private sector.
Right. Okay.
Now, again, the headache, the issue that I saw, and again, this has a lot of historical bearing on it, and it also has an impact on why the court ruled the way it did. The discussions were always at that point. The discussions were always with regards to a temporary program that would impact on blacks only. I remember that. Now, I remember that that there were organizations like the Southern Poverty Leadership Conference uh, that has been very, very active in the recent years of putting together enemies lists of who opposes the left.
Right.
But they were very, very active in trying to expand it to all minorities. Now, there was, I remember, very heated discussions, and this is very, very important, that that black leaders, particularly the old-time strong black leaders of the NAACP that had been in the 20s and 30s, these old gentlemen were very, very cautious that if you expanded it to other minorities, it was going to expand to heaven knows how far. And that's what's happened. Now, a transgender person can benefit or can claim affirmative action. And so at what point, there was that rainbow that some people kept talking about, which is now,
Yeah,
quite
the
common,
Rainbow
that
Coalition.
everybody wanted. Yes, the
Remember
Rainbow.
the Rainbow Coalition? That was the Jesse Jackson campaign of
Correct.
1984,
Correct.
or I guess 88 or 84.
And so, they were worried that it was going to dilute and
Right.
eventually become, inconsequential and negative. And what you've got now, for example, is Hispanics being classified as white Hispanics or minority Hispanics. Now, what the heck does that mean?
I know.
I mean, what does that mean?
Right.
You've got situations where there are Asian Americans, and they're the ones that brought the
Right.
suit. That
And that's
are
and
not
pardon me for
classified as Asian as
yeah.
minorities.
And pardon me for interrupting you again, but it's extremely important that we point out, and I'm glad you did, that it was Asian Americans who were fighting Harvard. It was not white, white
Exactly.
Americans. It was Asian Americans. And I think that's a good point that you brought up, George. I just wanted to emphasize that. So please continue.
Yeah, I have, in my personal life, I have a niece. I have a grandniece, actually, whose name is Chloe Murdoch. And Chloe, wants to claim her Hispanic heritage. She comes to Laredo. She, visits with all of the other cousins and whatnot. But for all practical purposes, she's American. She's white. She's Anglo, as on the surface.
You mean
And
like
she
Robert
would
Francis? You mean like Robert Francis O'Rourke?
O'Rourke? Yeah.
There
Well,
you go.
in his
There you
case,
go.
he is
Right.
Anglo all the
There
way.
you
I
go.
mean, I don't know
That's right.
what Hispanic there is in it, but why can't she benefit from affirmative action? Well, because the affirmative action officers claim that she is white and therefore she's. But there's this silliness that has developed within it, and I, for one, am very, very glad that the decision came out. Now, what really irritates me is to hear how some of the opposing justices, declared that there was positive discrimination, that there should be positive discrimination. I mean, what the heck does that mean?
That's that when you have to rely on that, George, you don't have an argument to win. You're just
Really?
throwing stuff out there. But
Like positive murder? I mean,
that's
I'm
right.
not sure
That's
exactly
right.
what that
Yeah,
means.
that's right. That's right. No, it's I am amazed. Well, I shouldn't be, because I told a friend of mine yesterday when we were talking about another opinion. I said, look, the big one is coming, and that's affirmative action. And look out for the meltdown, because the meltdown is going to be like we're seeing.
Yeah, and again, this is only as it pertains to education.
That's
admission.
right. That's right.
we
That's
still
right.
have to look at the issue of employment and everything that goes with it.
Right.
Promotions,
I agree. And that
layoffs.
is and that you got to deal with, George, on a case by case basis. You don't do these, overreaching decisions. You simply, I mean, if a person feels discriminated against because of their skin color, let's say that you work in a company and you feel like you were not promoted, let's say because you were black. Let's just say you were not promoted because you're black. You can sue.
You can sue.
You can
Exactly.
sue and settle that either out of court or at the courthouse, and that's fine. That has not been eliminated. That has not been eliminated.
Exactly. It's not
The
the end of the world as Michelle Obama is
That's
claiming.
right. And by the way, speaking of the Obamas, President Obama made some, again, hysterical remarks about this, and I was delighted to see Senator Scott take him on and just take him on. I mean, right back to him saying, "Hey, this is a great opinion." But the way I look at it is, as I said before, I remember the beginnings of all of this affirmative action back in the late 70s, 80s. And it seemed to me back then, as a younger person, obviously back then, that I felt that it was a correction that had to be made.
I
And
agree.
it was a
Yeah.
correction to, to some past policies where maybe there was maybe an acceptance, for example, that a black person couldn't be president of a bank or something like that. But that has been dealt with. That has been dealt with. And I just thought it was fascinating that you have the Asians, and I don't know exactly how to say their origin, but people from India and Pakistan and Nigeria, they've all been very successful in our schools and universities. And they're the ones who actually, it was the Asians who brought this lawsuit in Harvard, because the Asian parents are saying, "Hey, look, I raised my kid to study, to prepare, to get the best score that he can so that he can go to Harvard if he wants to. But now I'm being denied entrance or a place in Harvard because you're making an exception for someone else who's not at the same level of performance." I mean, that's not fair.
It isn't. It
And
absolutely.
yeah,
This situation has, in my opinion, become one where a lot of minorities feel entitled, and that is very damaging. That is very, very damaging. You are not entitled. An individual is not entitled to anything other than life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that's up to you.
right.
This situation that we've got, that somehow society owes you something like reparations or anything else. Affirmative action has become such a foundation, such a large foundation for building these sandcastles that are not realistic.
Mm-hmm.
That I can see how 3 generations, at least 2 adult generations, are going to have a hard time dealing with it.
Right. No, I agree. And I think that, if you're a young Hispanic, if you're a young black person, I would encourage you to take a look at the Asians. Take
It's
a
a
look at
culture thing. It is
yeah,
a
I
culture thing.
agree. I agree.
I
No,
mean,
I think so. George,
the situation with the, why isn't there more affirmative action in the NBA with players?
that's right. Well, that's right. We don't care. I mean, you go to an NBA game and you don't care the color of the people. You just want to see the best. And that's the way it should be.
The first 5 hitters for the Astros the other night were all Latinos
That's right.
from
That's
foreign
right.
countries.
No, you're right. You're right. And nobody cares because that's the best ball
Hey,
player the
they
Astros
won.
can find, and they
They
won.
won.
And you needed that win, but with the
Hey,
Rangers winning.
now.
Okay, we got time. I know we got time to settle the American League West. But I always find, for example, that when you go to a high school reunion, not a reunion, but when you go to a high school celebration, a graduation, you attend the graduation or even a college graduation, and the number of kids who are at the very top are Asians
Yeah,
and Indian Americans and so on. And you can understand when you look at the audience, you understand why they succeed. You got big families, you got support families, and
they study.
they study, they have a education culture where they teach their
Exactly.
kids, hey, go out and
Exactly.
take it. And I think some of that is missing, frankly, in some of the,
It's very much missing.
yeah. I
It's
mean,
very much missing.
I've had, look at the number of Hispanic kids who are dropping out.
Yeah.
Look at the number of, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of black Americans, they have family problems, family structure problems, growing up in broken homes or single parent homes. But the bottom line for me is that this was a decision that was overdue. I
It's
think,
very much.
things have balanced out now, and it's up to you now. If you want the best seat at the best college, hey, work for it. Work for it. Yeah, just
Look,
work. And
we've reached the point. We've reached the point, Silvio, where a normal, logical person cannot pretend that a man is a woman and that they cannot compete in athletics. The same thing has occurred when it comes to affirmative action. We can't pretend that someone is entitled to something just because of their
right.
race.
No,
Just
you're
because
right.
of their race.
You're exactly right. And I feel that way too. And I think it's time to move on, and in a sense, the message, and this is what Tim Scott said. Tim Scott said, hey, the opportunity's out there, go for it. And study and work hard, and you'll get your place at the university of your choice. So I am very happy with this decision. I
I'm
think it was
very
the
happy.
right thing. It was the right thing. And I always find it, though, interesting, George. One last thing about this, and then we'll go on. 6-3 decision, which means that there are three members of the court who somehow uh,
Justified.
believe. Yeah, I'm sitting there saying, on what basis do you have to continue to support this? Now, if the justices, these three justices, want to tell me that they believe that the affirmative action should stay in place, what they should do, George, is run for the Senate, run for the
Exactly.
House, get out of the
Exactly.
court.
Now, I will tell you, and I have felt this way all along. I believe that there are at least two members of the Supreme Court who are nothing more than products of affirmative action. I cannot believe that these two individuals are the best qualified, the most qualified, as far as attorneys that you can find in the United States. That's a tough um, statement to make, but that's my opinion, and I think that's why they believe it. They have been uh, uh, they are products of the affirmative action system.
Yeah.
We have a vice president. I'm sorry, I cannot believe that the vice president, Kamala Harris, has not benefited from affirmative action. Otherwise, she probably be doing something else.
Right. But
But
here's my point on that, George, is I don't disagree with what you just said, but it seems to me it's time to move on from that,
exactly, that
and
is exactly right.
simply say, you know what? If somebody got into the Supreme
Best and the
Court,
brightest in America should be the
yeah,
ones that we
right.
encourage.
But we should move on from that and look, like you say, at the best and the brightest. Now, there is another big decision coming tomorrow, and I think I know how it's going to go, or I'm going to predict how it's going to go, and that's the student loan one, where
Logic would happen. Logic would
yeah,
happen.
by executive order, the president did this. And by the way, and I remember reading about this, he did it during the campaign.
Yes,
And then I remember reading later that it mobilized a lot of campuses around this
correct.
issue, that they were literally young people, mobilized to support Democrats because of this. And I'm sitting there saying to myself, how can a 20 or 21-year-old student in a university believe that the president of the United States can cancel his student debt by executive order? I mean, what kind of government lessons are these kids learning? I mean, I objected to it immediately because it was an executive order. And the idea that there would be young people in our universities who thought, oh, wow,
Who would
if you
believe it?
vote,
Who would first of all believe it and then think it's a good idea?
yes. And so, I think that's going to go down too. It probably won't get the same attention as the affirmative action. But I think that the
Well,
president is going to
you know,
lose that one too.
my fear, I'll tell you what my fear is. My fear, I mean, we're hearing it right now. Uh, the ladies on The View were screaming and yelling that it's time to do something about the Supreme Court. If this happens, if this one goes down the way we think it's going to go down, where they're going to, you know, cancel the executive order and they're going to have to pay their loans back. I fear that there's going to be some violence, but more than anything else, an outcry to, and it'll be very popular. It'll be among the minority, but it'll be very loud, of redoing the Constitution, of redoing the number of
Well,
justices
packing the
on
court, what they like to
packing the
call
court.
packing the court. Yeah.
I mean, I can just hear it now.
Yeah. No, I think that will happen. I have no doubt that they're going to say that this is an illegitimate court.
An illegitimate court. I love that.
It's so funny because 2 days ago, when President Biden got a
It was a
victory
very
out of this court, nobody said it was illegitimate.
It was a very legitimate court at that
Yeah, it was very legitimate 2 days ago when they gave him a victory. Now all of a sudden they're illegitimate.
Well,
But again, those are signs of desperation, I think,
yeah.
on the part of people. When you start saying that we need to pack the court, you know, my friend Sally, who is a history teacher, and she's watching probably later, will watch the replay later. She knows what happened back in 1937 when President Roosevelt came up with the idea of packing the court.
Yes.
It was a disaster for him. In fact, many people feel that was one of the reasons that he lost so badly in the 1938 midterms. It was because of packing the court. So I have no doubt that they're going to try to do it. But, you know, this is where Joe Manchin actually helps us, because I don't think Joe Manchin would vote for it. And it would probably require 60 votes in the Senate. Well, they couldn't get it out of the House as it is right now. They couldn't get a majority out of the House for that. But, you know, even if they had a majority in the House, they couldn't get 60 in the Senate because they just don't have it. But yes, that's packing the court. That's coming. Get ready for that one. That's we're going to hear a lot about that. But I do think,
I
George,
want one of those attorneys that feels that forgiving a loan is constitutional. I want one of those attorneys with me at the last day at the judgment. I want one of those.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I want everything forgiven.
Right, but I think that
just wipe it out.
what I always come back to is that it's either a court or it's a legislative body.
Yes,
but it cannot be both. It cannot be both. It's like the umpire in a baseball game. Okay, either he's the umpire or he's cheating from one side or the other.
Right. They want conservatives. They want conservatives, constitutional folks, to go the full 10 yards to get a first down. However, when it's their turn, they're only going to go 5.
Right. No, I agree. But I do believe that they're going to be melting down again tomorrow, because that one is going to happen. I'm pretty sure of that tomorrow. Well, one quick note here before we wrap up. There is a session. The legislature is starting a new session. Property tax is the big issue. We can get more into it at a later show, but it looks like this session is going to focus on property tax and school choice. Those are the two big stories that the governor, certainly property tax, maybe they'll come back for school choice later. But George, I am surprised, or maybe I shouldn't be, that it's that complicated to do a property tax, basically distribution of money. Because what they're doing is, returning $30 billion to the people. I can understand if it was a tax increase. I can understand all the controversy, but they're basically returning the money back to people. I'm surprised that it's been that complicated, George. I don't know if you have the same reaction.
Oh, definitely. But I think that the anxiety of how to do it rests on who gets how much. I mean, it all went into the coffers for the state. Now the state is going to return it. You would think that the state would return the amount that a given district or a given jurisdiction or a given area got. But the big battle right now is, well, if you're going to give it back, then give it back accordingly uh, to a distribution that's equitable. And a lot of folks, are having second thoughts about how to do that, and uh, whether or not it's to give it directly to the state, give it to the citizen, let them use it for projects. I mean, it's become convoluted. To me, it's very, very simple. Just cut a check, return it, and that's the end.
Well, or either that or just give you a tax credit
Exactly, or a
on your
tax credit.
property
I'd be
tax.
happy with that.
Give every property owner in
Although,
Texas
although the big battle is, and they haven't touched it, is the issue of how to keep the school districts from just upping the money, the assessments every year. I mean, the assessment for the school district here in San Antonio, in the Northeast School District where I live, has just gone through the roof. So the state can return all the money they've got, but if the school district continues to raise and raise and raise, I mean,
then
price you out.
it's basically the same thing as before. Then no, but I just thought. I mean, maybe I'm naive, but I thought it would be a lot less complicated.
It's like making sausage.
Well, that's it, and maybe in retrospect, George, the governor tried to do too much in this session. I don't know.
Well, it was quite ambitious. It was quite
Yes.
ambitious. I mean, the Republican Party delegates put together a very, very large, ambitious agenda, and the agenda, while the legislators did not use it as a roadmap, they certainly addressed a lot of the issues that were on there.
Right.
And, it's been tough.
There were some good things that happened so far. The DIE or DEI.
Yes, which is another meltdown that the left had.
That was good. And I think some of the moves they've made with, what they teach in schools and all of that, I thought that was a good move.
The transgender, the not allowing
CRT or whatever.
Yeah, not allowing transgender to.
Right. So I thought those were all positive things, but the two big ones coming up are the property tax. Now I saw a note today that the lieutenant governor is apparently making some progress on that issue. I don't know if that's something to
what it looks like at the end. We'll see.
Right. But that always happens a lot of times. At the end is when they cut the deal. But when they do a session, everybody's got to come back, right? Not just
everybody's got to come back.
Everybody has to come back. Yeah. So I assume after the 4th, they will be back. Just like you and me, George, we'll be back after the 4th to talk a little bit about politics. But
I'm excited about the 4th.
Yes.
Christmas and the 4th are my favorites.
Yeah, absolutely. July 4th is an absolutely great holiday, something that we all need to celebrate. George, thank you as always for your time. And we will get together again sometime in the next 10 days or so to look at the state. I mean, at the legislative session and see what is going on down in Austin. But thank you for your time as always.
You got it. Thank you very much.
All right, my pleasure. My good friend George Rodriguez joining us this week to talk about the affirmative action decision that the Supreme Court just passed, a decision that I think was long overdue. And I think it's simply, race should not be a factor in how we consider people for admissions. And that's just the way it is. That's the American thing to do. Just remember the words of Martin Luther King, that he wanted his kids to be judged by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. That's the guide. I mean, that should always be the guidepost. What Martin Luther King said many, many years ago. Have a happy 4th, everybody. We'll get together after the weekend. Actually, we'll get together before the 4th, but have a happy weekend, everybody. And we'll talk to you later. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas.